Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. My name is Infantry Pulse, and today we're going to do a just for fun kind of Theorycraft with some skills in FEH that could be used on different weapon types. So with Deadeye being added to the game, we've gotten some weapon exclusive skills. Dragons have kind of also had this for quite a long time in the form of Hone Dragons, Ward Dragons, and the like, but they've also gotten Dragon's Ire and Dragon Wall recently. So it got me thinking, well, what if some other weapon classes had exclusive skills of their own? So we're going to go through some ideas I've had based on skills that already appear in other Fire Emblem franchise games and how to incorporate them into FEH. So the first one we're going to cover today is probably one of the most thought about how to include it in FEH skills, and that is Lethality. So Lethality is an assassin skill in most games, but we're going to cover the Fire Emblem Fates version here today, which was part of the Master Ninja class. So in Fire Emblem Fates, this actually automatically kills an opponent. There are lots of boss units that are immune to automatic death and all that kinds of stuff. But that is the way it works. It goes off of a activation stat, like a skill stat. So it's kind of like a crit, and in a lot of ways, crits are interpreted in Fire Emblem Heroes as specials. So I have interpreted this as a special for the Dagger class. Now, it could also be a sword skill. A lot of Myrmidon promoted classes, especially assassins, get this in a lot of the other versions of Fire Emblem, but I decided to go with the Master Ninja version because I feel like it would just be better on daggers. It's one of those skills also that could be inheritable, but maybe both daggers and swords. I've chosen to go with daggers just because why not? So a daggers unit then would get a 8 cooldown special, right? So it's a very impactful special, so a huge cooldown, something that would, be appropriate for how powerful a skill like this might be. And so the skill reads, when triggered, if attack would leave target with more than 1 HP, reduces target's HP to 1, foe cannot recover HP during or after combat, and after combat inflicts wounds, deep wounds on the target. And deep wounds is, of course, the unit cannot be healed through its next action. So this is basically not an instant kill, but close to an instant kill. I feel like a instant kill in FEH would be very, very, very powerful. I would say too powerful. And so it needed to be balanced in my eyes just a little bit. So something that's a near fatality and can leave the foe in a place where a unit or another teammate can follow up on them. I felt like that was a good place to be. Also, being super high cooldown means that it's not going to be fired off more than once during a game for any reason usually. So that is why I've decided to go with this kind of version of it. It's still super powerful. It's still incredibly impactful, right? But it is not the instant kill that Lethality is in the main series Fire Emblem games. So it's a little bit more balanced. So for an example build, I've actually given Kagero here. So Kagero is good because she can use an Ouch Pouch. She has low HP, so she's easily pulsable, and she has a very high attack stat to work with. So with Ouch Pouch, Times Pulse, and Quicken Pulse, she's getting 4 of those charges, so she needs 4 more infantry pulses above her, which is still quite a lot. It's still quite a lot of investment to put on her to pre-charge that lethality. But with that lethality then, she's going to do very, very well. So I've given her ARD, Speed Defense, and Null Follow-Up. With those 2 things, she should be able to double a lot of opponents and survive a retaliation hit. And that's the important thing, right? Because if Kagero just dies and the opponent's left with 1 HP, obviously an ally can finish them off, right? But if Kagero can get that follow-up attack after a pre-charged lethality, that means that she can just destroy the unit herself, right? So as long as she can survive, she should be good to go. Steady Impact would also be another option for the A slot, but I felt like ARD Speed Defense would work just as well. You don't really need to stop an opponent's follow-up attack with something like an Impact skill if you're just going to murder them anyway. So that's my idea for how to incorporate lethality into FEH. Again, it could be a sword skill, for sure. A lot of assassins get it, but I thought this was an interesting way to incorporate it for sure. Next up, we have Clarity. So Clarity is a skill from Fire Emblem Echoes that was available to the overclass sword unit that promoted out of the Dread Fighter, right? So It basically reduced the amount of time it took for stat penalties to wear off on characters. But here I've decided to actually give it a little bit of a power up and just remove all those kind of penalties at the start of turn. I feel like that's more impactful in FEH because the games are shorter, right? So something that can remove that, kind of like a self-odd recovery or a self-Kia staff, I think that's super, super useful. You could also buff it a little bit more if it doesn't feel impactful enough by giving it extra stats if the unit did cleanse a penalty like Kia Staff does, maybe like a couple extra attack or speed or something like that. So it could be like attack speed clarity or, you know, like speed res clarity or something. That's also an option. But I think just going with a base clarity form is definitely the way to go. This is not the most impactful skill ever, but it's good in certain situations. So the situation that I've chosen to put that in is Larcei. So Larcei, there we go, Larcei. Wow, that took a while to get out. So Larcei. Larcei is a very good unit on Aether Raid's defense because she negates enemy buffs rather. So with attack speed ideal, you can guarantee that she has some kind of buff, and hopefully will be at 100 HP, so she could have +9 attack and speed with that, plus attack speed bond, plus the bonuses from her weapon, plus clarity means she's doing quite a bit actually for herself. So she actually can be a very, very hard unit to deal with, and definitely one of the better users of the clarity skill. Now the clarity skill wouldn't be great on Aether Raid's offense because a lot of times you're baiting units, which means it's an enemy phase thing. Player phase is really where a skill like clarity would shine. So you want your player phase units to be impactful in that way. It could also be good in like maybe PvE modes or arena modes for sure, but I definitely think the best place to use it would be on Aether Raid's defense. So next up, we are going to go into maybe a more obscure and controversial skill, and that is Phalanx. So Phalanx was a skill from, again, Fire Emblem Echoes, that was part of the overclass for the Lance units in that game, so this was a Spartan class, I believe. So in that game, it had a chance to reduce all incoming damage, which is really good. It's really, really strong, right? But that would be very, very overpowered in Fire Emblem Heroes. So I decided to model it off of Fallen Star by Claude. So Claude's Fallen Star in 3 houses makes him dodge the next attack, right? So eventually reduces the damage to 0, kind of like Phalanx does, right? So in Heroes, that does an 80% damage reduction. That's still a lot. That's still super impactful. So I've decided to go with that 80% damage reduction in Heroes as well. So it's a 5 cooldown special, so it's the same as Miracle. I think that's pretty comparable in terms of how many charges it would be. It could need to be 6 maybe, just because it is super impactful, obviously. But I think that, like Miracle, it does very, very well. In terms of being a 5 cooldown special, it feels impactful. It feels like it's the appropriate amount of charges. Most of the time, you're only going to be able to fire it off once per combat. So, that being said, I have some ideas about how to employ that. So my first one is going to be with Chris, female Chris. So female Chris has slaying on her weapon, which is definitely something that you need, and this is an infinite Phalanx build. So what happens is, Chris would hopefully pre-charge Phalanx or just, you know, take a couple hits beforehand. Once Phalanx is charged, though, she would be reducing the damage by 80%, firing off a counterattack with Heavy Blade to get her special +2, maybe another one to fully charge it. Or if she doesn't get the Heavy Blade, then she gets the second proc of it, whatever. Then she's getting Special Spiral after combat to cool it down. So if you think 5 cooldown for Phalanx from base, goes down to 4 because of slaying. She gets 2 cooldown from Heavy Blade, and then 2 cooldown after combat with Special Spiral. This is an infinite Phalanx build, essentially. So this is really, really strong because you're getting that 80% damage reduction on the first combat. I've also decided that it should be, you know, universal damage reduction as opposed to near or far, because I think that that's something that's going to make Lance units stand out a little bit more. That being said, there is the elephant in the room of, instead of Chris looking at something like a Brave Hector, who is already good at running the what am I trying to say? Yeah. The Infinite Miracle build. There we go. I got there. The Infinite Miracle build as is. But he can run an Infinite Phalanx build to great effect because he's already so tanky as it is. He has a slaying weapon. So he's just going to take, like, essentially no damage a lot of the time. So that would be really great. If we ever got a slaying null follow-up fast lance in the future, that would be the most ideal for a build like this. Something that can make sure that the enemy isn't going to double them, and then be able to constantly fire off phalanx so they're only taking 80% every single turn. That would be very, very strong. That would be very, very good. Yeah, so that's phalanx. Definitely one of the more obscure skills, but I think something that would be really, really cool to have in Fae. Maybe not phalanx Hector. That seems toxic, but it was an idea I had, so I thought I'd put it out there. Next up is the Life Taker skill, as it appears in Fire Emblem Echoes. This skill is also in Fates, I believe, and Awakening. And maybe, I think a version of it is in Three Houses as well for the Dark Bishop class. But this skill essentially restores health upon defeating an enemy. So that's a pretty basic skill. It's a pretty easy skill to do, pretty easy skill to incorporate in Fae. So this will be a Tome-Exclusive Skill, because it is a Tome skill in all of the games it appears in. And the way I've translated that is as a B skill, kind of like Renewal. So if unit defeats an enemy, restores 50% of unit's maximum HP. And I've limited it to once per turn, because if it's more than once per turn, it would get just a little bit crazy. So I think this is a good skill, but I don't think it's the most impactful skill in the world. It definitely has its uses. It's a good thing for tank units that maybe don't want null follow-up for whatever reason, or, you know, there are plenty of good B skills to deal with, but definitely a contender as far as Tome B skills go. So the unit I've decided to feature with it is Fallen Male Morgan. So Fallen Male Morgan has follow-up prevention and follow-up guarantee in his Tome as long as his conditions are met. He also has guard effect on there. So in terms of being a good unit, this is a very, very strong idea for him. So this is an Aether Raid's offense set where he has Close Counter, Mystic Boost to help out with his consistent healing, and then he can run a damaging special. So with Life Taker and Mystic Boost, he can actually run a damaging special like Ruptured Sky, or like Moonbow, or even Glimmer. A 2 cooldown something or other, so he's firing it off most every single combat. And then I put Attack Smoke in his C, but you could stick with his default Attack Res Menace. Yeah, he's just a good skill. He's just a good unit in general. Definitely a good user of something like Life Taker, but there are other units that could definitely use it to great effect as well. It is competing, though, with things like Null Follow-Up and Null Seed Disrupt, so there's a choice to be made there for sure. And finally, we are going to look at an Axe-exclusive skill in the form of Counter. In the base game, it is Fire Emblem Awakening, but it appears in several games, and it is a super toxic and tilting skill if you've ever played those games and know how painful these kind of skills can be. So in Awakening, it basically retaliates the foe's damage against them. So it's really annoying because it's basically like a damage reflection, and if you've ever played like an MMO, you know that damage reflection is super toxic and super tilting for sure. I actually don't read when I play games apparently, and I accidentally killed my Lucina against a just random fighter in the middle of the desert because I didn't read. So it's definitely a very well-known skill, I'll say that. So I've interpreted in Fire Emblem Heroes as a B skill. So it's a lot like, you know, a Quick Riposte or something like that, where it's filling up that B slot, which is pretty competitive. And the way I've decided to interpret it is by saying, during unit's first combat in enemy phase, if an adjacent foe initiates combat and unit can counterattack, deals damage to foe equal to 50% of damage received by foe's first attack. Now, that's a lot of words. Basically, it says that if an adjacent foe attacks a unit and your unit can counterattack, it's going to deal half the damage that unit receives back at them. The unit needs to survive in order for that to happen, but it's definitely a very, very strong skill. and definitely something that can be super annoying. I limit it to foes first combat on the enemy phase because it feels like it could get really overpowered really quickly. But it's definitely something that is still super good. So I think a unit that uses it pretty well would be something like a Brave Ike on Aether Raid's defense. Now, on offense, you can run Null Follow-Up, you can run Null C Disrupt. There's lots of good B skills for Ike, but he kind of struggles to find the perfect B skill for him on a defense team. He's a really good defense unit. He's a very excellent frontliner in a lot of ways, but I think that having a skill like Counter would improve his odds. Now, it is limited a little bit by having to be an adjacent foe in order to do that. It could this skill could be, you could lose that condition and not have it be an adjacent foe, and then it would be very, very good for something like this Ike. But definitely it's good to go against things like Reagan, who likes to hit Ike with a pre-charge special. Obviously, this Ike specifically would live that pretty well because of Mystic Boost, but definitely a skill that would be super strong to have on any Axe frontliner, really. It could also have applications on Aether Raid's offense if you really wanted it to, but I think that on Aether Raid's offense, you're more often going to run things like Null C Disrupt, or if you're running an armor, you're going to run one of the armor preferred skills like Special Fighter, or, you know, on Brave Edelgard, like Black Eagle's Rule or whatever. Definitely a good skill, not a great skill, not the most overpowered. I think Lethality is definitely, I went the hardest on making that the most powerful because it is the most common. Phalanx is also super probably overtuned, but that's just fine. I just did this for fun. I think it would be cool to see some of these skills incorporated into Fae. Let me know what you guys think. Post down below in the comments what skills that are in the mainline Fire Emblem games that you would like to see incorporated into Fire Emblem Heroes and how you guys would do it. I'm curious to see about that. This is something that I have a lot of really fun doing, is trying to get things from the main Fire Emblem franchise into Heroes in fun and creative ways. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to give it a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.